keeping on mute so that we don't get any extra sounds. We actually intended on hosting these events in person, but unfortunately, like many of you, plans have changed because of the recent events. And my name is Kehal Meyer. I'm a program officer at the Hawaii Community Foundation. Joining us today is Michelle Kauhane, our Senior Vice President of Community Grants and Initiatives. And also joining us today is Lisa Maruyama. She's the President and CEO of the Hawaii Alliance of Nonprofit Organizations, also known as HANO. And you'll get to hear from her. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that all of us are going through the coronavirus pandemic together. We know that there's a lot going on and everyone's shifting accordingly. While our presentation today is going to be focused on supporting our nonprofit sector, we recognize that there are very real health and human impacts going on right now. And while we don't really want to delve into those particulars, this presentation will exist in that context. So we decided to conduct these events to provide certain information to you. When we're moving at what seems like the speed of light, we can lose connection with others. And as we do our best to be transparent, we want to provide as much information as we can, answer a lot of the questions that are coming up at your organizations, and support community building among us as nonprofit partners. We're all in this together. In this presentation, we'll try to address the common themes among the questions that you've asked us. All of you answered a bunch of questions at registration. You asked us what we thought about the state of the sector moving forward. You asked about grants and resources, including those that are not considered front lines, right? You asked about the phases of our funding and about advocacy and about the CARES Act. We will have time, hopefully, for a Q&A session if everything goes according to plan, to address any other questions that might come up along the way. So I'd like to do a really quick check-in with all of you. Find that chat box at the bottom of the screen, and if you're comfortable sharing, use one of these old-fashioned emoticons to let us know how you're feeling today. Looks like they're coming in. Awesome. Looks like most of the group is doing pretty good. Some people are a little overwhelmed, totally understandable. Awesome, thank you. Thank you for sharing how you're doing today. So to give you a sense of your peers on the call today, we actually asked all of you a couple of questions when you registered, and about 200 of you responded, so thanks for that. We asked how your organization is managing now, and 54% of you said, okay, but you're getting a little nervous. And another 35% of you are already on overload. We also asked about the significant challenges that you're facing right now. And most of you said it was financial, which is definitely understandable. And a third of you are experiencing multiple challenges. So when Lisa at HANO shares, you're going to see results of their survey, and you're going to notice that there's a lot of similarities between what you've told us and what your peers in the nonprofit sector are sharing. On the national level, nonprofits are reporting significant impacts. The report from La Piana Consulting indicates that there are high rates of staff reduction and reduction in services. 70% of their respondents are reporting loss of revenue. And on average, the respondents were laying off 19% of their staff. They summed up their survey, and one of the key takeaways is that COVID-19 is changing everything. So what's critical to ask, we think, is what comes after. But before we get to that, let's talk about what we know. There are immediate health and human service needs that require our attention now. Regardless of everything else that we know, protecting health and well-being of our community is critical. This is especially true for our vulnerable populations because COVID-19 has really exposed to us the vulnerabilities of our community, and the inequities that existed before are really taking a hit now. Terms like PPE have also become a daily part of our vernacular. The financial impacts, both personal and institutional, are incredible. There's staggering unemployment rates, and since March, we have seen about 230,000 claims made, which is a third of the state's workforce. And hearing about the proposed 20% cut in state salaries was really an incredible moment last week for most of us. So loss of revenue and capital is already occurring. And there are projections that the economic impacts are going to run through the rest of the year and into next year, if not longer. We're also following the projections of when COVID-19 is supposed to peak in Hawaii. And from what we know, it's actually supposed to be today. But everything doesn't start back up tomorrow, right? We will be slow to start. We have to remain necessarily cautious. And being mindful of a reemergence, we have to really meet certain standards. And Governor Ige reaffirmed on Friday that Hawaii hasn't met a lot of those required standards to reopen. So the challenge of COVID-19 is that there's not a finite end, and that we can actually, we're going to have to consider that when we're planning forward. We also know that the CARES Act was signed in the amount of $2.2 trillion for the nation. And there are some benefits to the nonprofit community, the Paycheck Protection Program, which some of you have engaged with, and the Economic Injury Disaster Loans. And we know that the CARES 2.0 Act is coming up. It looks like maybe mid to late May, it'll probably be on the table for approval. And there are a lot of efforts to advocate for more nonprofit organizations. And Lisa from Hano is actually going to share more about that, and especially the philanthropic components to the CARES Act that could help your donors with their charitable giving to your organizations. Finally, we know that there are still a lot of unknowns. But in uncertainty, we can return to the core values, remind ourselves of our missions at our organizations. And we need to be more intentionally understanding about what our community needs and respond to that in the most effective and efficient ways we can. Having said that, let me turn over to Michelle to talk about the establishment of our Hawaii Resilience Fund and what we're doing and why.
Oops. Thank you, Kehao, and thank you everyone for joining us. I know that you're extremely busy, especially right now. So I'm going to take a few minutes just to walk through the Hawaii Resiliency Fund so that you are understanding how it is that we're making grants from this pot of money. As you know, we launched the fund a little over a month ago. And dollars that were in our normal grant making budget for 2020, as Kehao shared earlier, our intention was to come out to you to talk about what we were doing in terms of our change framework and kind of get our finger on the pulse of the sector to figure out our grant making going forward, because we had flex on pause. The dollars that we dedicated to that grant making have shifted, and we're the first $1 million into the Hawaii Resilience Fund that got us started to raise money through our donors. We've looked at the fund in 4 specific phases. Just following the volcano recovery and the flooding on Kauai, we had a conversation about how we prepare ourselves and our community for the next disaster. Today, we're looking at COVID as that disaster, and we're following the structure and plan that we developed following the last 2 disasters where the Community Foundation responded. So phase 1 is really focused on risk reduction and readiness. And so in that phase, we focus on PPE, about reducing the burden on the healthcare system, on increasing the amount of testing, and ensuring that our vulnerable populations could stay indoors, our kupuna, the homeless, so that they would have isolation and quarantine possibilities if they were being tested. So really around risk reduction and readiness to, as you've heard the term before, as we try to flatten the curve, right? Reduce the burden that would be on the healthcare system. Phase 2 is around rapid relief and response. And those grants really focus on us responding to the need, the increased need for food distribution. So a lot, significant dollars to the food banks and other distribution channels that are feeding communities across the state, as well as emergency grant assistance that every island has an awardee who is issuing financial grants up to $1,000 to help families with gap grant money to cover rent, utilities, or other essentials due to job loss, in hopes that it'll hold them over just a little bit until either the stimulus checks start to arrive or unemployment starts to kick in. Phase 3 is around recovery and stabilization. As I shared on the last call, we will definitely reach out to get input and community feedback from the sector on some of your thoughts about recovery and stabilization. However, we do know moving forward that we are dedicated to longer term access to capital in the form of low interest loans. So engaging local community loan funds and CDFIs who are able to provide access to capital to nonprofits, to small businesses, and to individuals, so that they can get back on their feet. And that's just one strategy that we're developing and we're working on. Many of you have heard that the Bank of Hawaii made a significant contribution to the Resilience Fund. A portion of that 1 million is dedicated to this recovery and stabilization phase, which is why we're having that discussion around access to capital for underserved populations. And then the fourth phase, again, we'll come and get feedback around rebuilding resilience. Where do we go from here? Post-COVID, we have an opportunity to recreate the systems that are not working for us. As Kehau shared, the inequities that we knew that already existed are exacerbated now that we're here in this COVID era. And really taking a look as what is it going to take for us? How do we invest properly at the community foundation to rebuild ongoing resilience in our communities so that we're prepared, not if, but when the next disaster hits. And so we will definitely be reaching out prior to phase 3 and 4. But I just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of the way we're looking at the requests that are coming in and how we kind of categorize those phases of this fund. On our website, we will have a running list of grantees that we have provided resources to from across the state. This is a list of grantees as of April 10th. If you check out our website at hawaiicommunityfoundation.org, you will see we have a COVID button and with resources, and you can get an updated list of all of the grants that were made each week. So our executive leadership team is responsible for the peer reviews of all of the requests that come in. We meet every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to review incoming requests that are aligned in each of those phases. And we're turning around dollars through electronic transfer out of the resiliency fund so that we can get resources to community as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, following the last two disasters on Kauai and Hawaii Island, we also went through the process of creating what we call strong funds for each of the counties. So a Maui strong, Kauai strong, Hawaii Island strong, and an Oahu strong, actually, that's not listed here. But each county has a smaller pot of dollars that could also be, it follows those same 4 phases, but they're smaller dollar amounts. But another pot of money that we have allocated from our grant making budget and continue to raise dollars for. These funds are specifically for donors who want their giving to go to a specific county. Then those dollars would go into the specific county fund. And again, a list of those grantees that were made up till the 10th of April. For Maui, I can assure you that there are a number of new grants that were made to Maui up until and including this morning. And so you'll see that that list is forever changing. Again, our website will have the latest information.
Thank you, Michelle. So beyond grant making, we are in the process of networking with other funders, and on a national level, we're making sure that we're implementing best practices. Looking forward to other resources that we can offer that are coming in every day. So we are regularly logging in to webinars with our funding partners, and we're hoping to keep track of all the resources that we can offer back to all of you. We're also working through existing networks to make grants, and this is another thing that we find value in, having these established networks built throughout the year. We are engaged in conversations with the public sector, and this includes conversations around how federal funds from the CARES Act are going to be effectively distributed. With this being said, we've had initial conversations of being a potential intermediary, especially in the area of food networks and emergency assistance. And within that, we're also collecting and analyzing data from our national and local sources. But our grantees that we're funding through the Hawaii Resilience Fund are going to be giving us some information. We're not asking for full reports, but we are checking in because we do know that there's value to knowing what's working and what's not. We want to be able to gather data to adjust our funding strategies where we should, so that all the money that we're pushing out is effectively and efficiently used. One of our partners during this time is Hano, and this is because they are at the forefront of advocating for the nonprofit sector in Hawaii. So I'm going to give Lisa an opportunity to share more about that. Lisa?
Hi, everyone. Aloha. It's so good to see so many familiar faces on this call. And I know many of us are feeling pretty isolated in this sheltering stretch. So hold on. I just need to exit my full screen. Okay, find my notes here. Okay, so I wanted to show you on this first slide that Hano did a quick survey, a quick pulse survey that began in March. It ended at the end of March. And while it was a snapshot at the time, because as we know, things have been changing dramatically by the day, we did use this data to actually tell the larger story of the nonprofit sector with policymakers, funders, the media, and I think it's been very helpful to demonstrate the impact of COVID on our sector. Thank you and mahalo to everyone on the call who actually may have participated on this survey. We had 112 responses from organizations that represented a variety of missions: health and human service, natural resource conservation, INA-based organizations, arts and cultural groups, and economic development focused organizations. So what you see on this slide is just a brief overview. Again, no big surprises, very aligned to HCF's data actually, which is, you know, if you can think about it, it's a month later. These are just brief results. But basically, we know that COVID has had a dramatic effect, and these were questions of what nonprofits were experiencing both at the time and also how they felt the situation was going to evolve. And so at the time of this snapshot, 2/3 of the organizations were already experiencing significant impacts, and 83% were already anticipating greater impacts. We asked about impacts to the financial bottom line. Again, not surprisingly, some were already implementing cutbacks to both programmatic services as well as admin services. Folks were worried about the loss of income from events and fundraising efforts, government contracts, and foundation income, which surprisingly was the point of least consternation. And we think it's because while not uniform across all foundations, many of the local foundations have been reaching out to their grantees to ask how they can help. And so actually, if you haven't had this conversation with your foundations, you really should, because many are willing to relax some of their timelines, their grant deliverables. Some are willing to take restricted grants and move them to unrestricted. Some are willing to advance cash if you have multi-year grants from foundations. And so we encourage you to please start that conversation if you haven't already. Slide 2 actually shows the restrictions and economic slowdown around and anticipated layoffs. As you can see, 43% were anticipating having to lay off. The range of supports that organizations needed were, you know, short-term funding, short-term staffing, you know, increased demand in services. Of course, this is a perfect storm for many of you who may actually still be deemed essential, and you're still having to be out there providing service. Maybe you've had to pivot your service a bit to COVID, and you're also trying to survive financially. So this has been clearly very hard for people. And already in March, 43% of the respondents were contemplating layoffs, as I said. Okay, slide 3, moving on to advocacy, and I'm going to kind of break it down by federal, state, county. So starting with federal relief, you know, some of these relief packages are well known to you, but just in case, the first congressional relief package was geared to science and technology. The second was the Families First Coronavirus Relief Act, which focused on family leave, sick leave, payroll, those types of remedies. And then the third relief package, which I'll talk about in detail, is of course the CARES Act. It's a 2.2 trillion economic stimulus package, as Kehao referenced, including options for small businesses and nonprofits. For the first time, SBA loans were made available to nonprofits, but as of last week, many of you know the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, was shut down because the feds ran out of money. And I just found out that the PPP in Hawaii, for that, 11,373 loans were approved in Hawaii. And that includes, of course, for-profit small business. I don't have the breakdown of how many nonprofits successfully applied. And just in kind of taking an informal poll over the last week, many of you have applied for the PPP, and I am hearing that you've received it. So, but the good news is that a new deal is possibly in the making. I think Kehao referenced that too, that possibly another relief package may be coming in early to mid-May. That's $251 billion extra dollars for the PPP. So I would say that if you applied and you're in the queue and you haven't heard back, hang tight, that there's a possibility that the monies that were in the pipeline from the last go around may still, you know, be rewarded. But if you have not yet applied, I would wait actually until there is word that Congress is moving this second PPP relief package through. In the meantime, though, I really wanted to acknowledge and thank HCF, because they stepped in actually to fund the supports and the services of a technical assistance team that Hano rapidly put together for anybody who would like to have assistance in applying for the PPP loan or the EIDL loan. So please go to our website, and I will right now, actually, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to plop up our COVID resource page in the chat box, and that's where you can get to our our technical assistance list. And if you want to, you know, anticipate that perhaps this next package of relief is coming, you can get ready. Okay, so that's our COVID relief page. And so mahalo HCF. Also you can go to our general website for other resources. So another component of the CARES Act is the charitable deduction that was extended for donors. It's taken on top of the standard deduction for your taxes to encourage more charitable giving. So this is hopefully another aspect and feature of the CARES Act. Our National Council of Nonprofits, as many of you know, is our national organization based in DC, and we're one of 37 state associations affiliated with that organization. They are actually pushing really hard with other national organizations and including our congressional delegation to push version 2.0 of the CARES Act, which is kind of picking up everything that we missed in the first 3 federal packages. And so basically what I also wanted to share with you is the community letter that maybe many of your national organizations actually joined with my national organization on. I'm actually going to put the link to the letter in the chat box as well, because trying to navigate my way back here on my little laptop, but because it outlines some of the features of CARE 2.0 that you may be interested in advocating for. So here nope, there we go. Okay, and then, and that one, you know, it outlines that we need more PPP, of course, And also they're pushing for extending the charitable deduction to make it, you know, a deeper, more positive impact, et cetera. So another final feature that I wanted to highlight of the CARES Act is actually the unemployment insurance piece for self-insured nonprofits. And so at the moment, if many of the larger nonprofits have opted to self-insure and for unemployment. And so in good times, this is a very attractive idea. In bad times, when employers are having to lay off, there is a provision that requires the nonprofit to actually reimburse the state for these costs. And so the CARES Act is actually providing some of that relief, knowing that nonprofits are going to experience extreme financial duress to actually have to pay this. So the CARES Act pays for 50% of that reimbursement. And so CARES 2.0, which again, our national office is pushing for, is actually pushing to pick up the other 50%. So 100% relief to nonprofits in paying this expense. Okay, slide 4, please. So at the state level, I was invited to the House, by House Speaker Psyche, to the Legislative House COVID Committee on Economic Recovery and Disaster Preparedness. And just wanted to tell you a little bit about, kind of, in case you haven't been watching these Monday morning 10 o'clock meetings on Olelo. We're 5 meetings in, and this is really just kind of a way for information sharing. So information to push out to all of the trades. And so Hano is there representing the nonprofit sector, but you know, retail is there, hotels, food, transportation, construction, all of the trades are there. And at today's meeting, I think it's interesting to know that for the CARES Act money, it's actually already starting to filter down to the state and counties. They can come through potentially 40 to 50 mechanisms for funding. But still, what the state officials have been saying is that there's still no official guidance from the feds as to how to set up the structures for this, for nonprofits or whomever to apply for the money. So this is still very, very much a confusing process. I also wanted to share that, you know, rumors have had it that the legislative session, people are trying to figure out what to do with it. And so there are several options on the table: reconvene at some point, you know, status quo, same context and same duration, but just extend it into perhaps the summer or later. Another one is to reconvene, but really just very quickly for a couple of days to kind of tick off some of the things, the immediate things that need to happen, since it is the second year of the biennium. And then another option, which is also very provocative, is to wait completely until January 2021. So it's unclear what happens if you had appropriations, if you had bills going through the session before we had to stop for COVID. Hano is working with groups like Appleseed, Focused, HCAN, Hi-Fi to work on behalf of health and human service providers in particular, who have state and city government contracts and really are wondering how, one, if they are not being paid on time, you know, even pre-COVID, how do they get paid timely, especially with all of the extra stresses on government at this moment of time. And also that same question that everybody's asking is the CARES Act money, how will it be facilitated as it flows down from state, county to the nonprofit provider? I can share with you that at the City and County of Honolulu, CARES Act money is actually already there, flowing down. And the city possibly, as this is City and County of Honolulu, I want to qualify, actually may have already put out a NOFA as of today. So please look for that notice to find out who is eligible and what kind of money is being distributed through those types of grants. Finally, I just want to share that we are working with a cohort of funders and Hawaii Investment Ready to stand up an online resource platform that's going to facilitate asks and offers to match immediate needs in this COVID era. So currently we're in beta testing, so we're not officially launching the platform yet, but stay tuned because we would love for everyone to populate profiles there and to start connecting in that platform. And if you're not already on our e-communications list, please feel free to go to our website at Hano and join our mailing list for free, just so that you can be put in touch with all of these resources that we're trying to roll out in a timely manner. So that's it for me. Kehao, thank you so much for the time. Oh, you know what? I forgot. I'm also putting the link to the legislative task force, and it's all of the minutes, agendas, notes, and presentations that have been made since we began meeting. And I'll put that link there right now. Mahalo,
Thank you,
everybody.
Lisa.
Thank you.
So if you're not already a member of Hano, I think you can see the benefits to joining. I urge you to contact them to see what that would look like for you.
And then just one note before you move on, Kehao, and somebody posted in the comments, and I did see that also, that the city and county does have their NOFA out already today. So in case people want to go.
So the Nonprofit Quarterly recently wrote that the Great Recession resulted in millions of lost homes, trillions in lost wealth, and millions of people being unemployed. For the nonprofit sector as a whole, however, the impact was modest. COVID-19 will be different because the necessary social distancing and stay-at-home policies are impacting our sector, particularly in how we operate every day. There will be a long tail to this pandemic, with economic consequences to be felt certainly through the end of the year, if not for a few years. But there are things we can do now while we weather this storm together. So, one, you can continue assessing your current condition using tools like the Nonprofit Finance Fund's cash flow tool, and their scenario template will help you determine where you thought you would be and where you are. We encourage you to engage your board. They have to be a part of the decision-making and the solution. We know that there may be tough decisions ahead that will directly impact your employees and your communities, and your board should be able to help you through this part. We should continue to learn and adjust from our programs. You might not be able to do full-blown evaluations, but you can still look at data and review what's happening. And then beyond funding, we should be seeking partnerships. Many of you are already doing this. We encourage you to keep doing that. Tap into your networks and learn and work with your peers. This is actually what we've been seeing a lot of coming through our Resilience Fund proposals. And it's really encouraging to see the way our community is bonding and growing together. We should make plans, short-term for now, then intermediate plans for later. Given what you know now, what can you do to move forward, or perhaps just to maintain? We encourage you to make a communication plan. Communicate with your stakeholders, your donors, share information that you do have, the challenges or the solutions that you're coming across. And it's likely that your donors will stick with you through this as long as they know what you're doing. I think we need to be realistic with what we can expect in the next few months and through the end of the year, and be willing to adapt. Households may not be able to give as much because of the economic downturn, but this gives you a time to kind of look at your programs and see ways you can adapt to the new situation, or just make your program effective or efficient despite the shutdowns and the availability to run it as is. Remember to return to the basics. Engaging your community, inviting them to be a part of your plans moving forward is something that we definitely recommend. Consider the possibility of what new normals can be. What changes can we make to the current system and to the current processes that we all exist in? I stated earlier that COVID-19 was impacting some communities more than others, and we know that inequities exist. So, for instance, consider communities that are already burdened with underlying health conditions, communities with high rates of diabetes, or because of a lack of access to fresh and healthy foods, they have other health problems. Those communities are at high risk for COVID-19. And coming out of the pandemic, how can we be more focused on equity? We don't have to think about how to return to normal, but instead, how do we get to better? In our recent staff meeting, one of our senior VPs, Chris Van Burgick, she's the Senior VP of Strategic Initiatives and Networks, she said that we should rebuild the future we want, not the one we had. I think that's really important. And while it's not on this slide, I also think it's important that we all take care of ourselves. Take time outs, walk your dog, or like me, walk your imaginary dog. And be mindful of how you're feeling. And we encourage you just to seek help if you need to. We are here to help you with what we can, but there are other people out there that can help you with the other things that come with dealing with this pandemic. HCF has always prioritized effective organizations that are engaged with their communities, and we will always continue to do that, especially now. So here are some resources to consider. Keep in mind the phases of the Hawaii Resilience Fund, and email a request for funding at this grants@hcf-hawaii.org. While there's no official application, you should be sure to align your ask to one of the phases and include a specific dollar amount. We're asking you to not submit for gap funding, but rather how you're going to adapt your program and your services to meet the needs of our community. Technical assistance is available through the SBA, for the SBA programs. You can work with Hano, as Lisa said. Community grants are going to actually continue and be conducted from July. And we're going to be guided by the specifics of these funds, but be as flexible as possible where we can. Family literacy is another program coming up, and our private foundations are still hosting our RFPs for the remainder of the year. So you can go on our website and check out the calendar to see when Atherton, Cook, Baldwin, and Geist are going to be opening their RFPs. Cook, as you know, took a break for their celebration, but they will be opening back up in September of this year to accept proposals. Then as you assess your organization, if you're considering merging with another organization or restructure to share functions, HCF actually has a strategic structuring program that is managed by Ophelia. So you can reach out to her if this is something that you've been thinking about doing, or something that you might want to check in with her to see if it's eligible for this program. So there's a couple websites and partners that we want to direct you to. The Give Big Hawaii program, which many of us know from the Giving Tuesday event they had. They just launched the Aloha campaign, and this is a product of Honolulu Magazine, putting together a platform that smaller nonprofit organizations can use to accept donations. So you can register at www.givebighawaii.com. The Hawaii Council for the Humanities is receiving some funds through the CARES Act National Endowment for the Humanities. They're opening an application in May. So you can, let me see if I can get this link. I'll drop a link in the chat once this is done, so you guys can see that application. Senator Schatz also has resources for nonprofits on his page, and then Catch a Fire, which is a resource many of you might be familiar with, has professional volunteer matching services. So we're going to take some time now to do a little Q&A. We are ahead of schedule, so we'll stop Q&A around 2:25, and then we'll give myself about 5 minutes to wrap up. But I'm going to invite Michelle to come back and help answer any questions that might have been coming up during the presentation.
Any questions? I don't see any in the chat box. I see a little bit of conversation, but no questions in the chat box. Well, that's easy.
All right, well, I'm gonna just kind of go plug another program. If you think of a question while I'm talking about this other program, please throw it in the chat box. So we have the Hawaii Census that we have been supporting with our Hawaii counts. Enumerators were supposed to be going door to door starting this month and finishing in July. I know a lot of people have already done their census, but a lot of people actually haven't. So good news is that the collection is going to be extending through October 31st, and that we remind everybody that it's so important that we get counted, because from the 2010 census we're able to receive billions of dollars, and if we undercount we lose a lot of money. So what we want you guys to do is to extend this information to your networks if you can. If people didn't receive their mail, they can go online and put in their home address and then do their census that way. But please take down this information if you think you have a community that needs access to this and the support to do the census and get counted. And then I'm just going to thank you all now for your help, for your confidence in us, for your ability to come together as a community. We've been seeing such incredible community work in the last few weeks, month. We just hope that you found this informative. We will be sending out the slide deck. I think it's in the chat box now. And we just want to make sure that all these additional resources get to you. So the follow-up email will include a lot of the links and things that were referenced. There are difficult times ahead, and certainly we know this, but we also want to be hopeful for the growth and change that is possible. We are partners with you. We want you to know that we're here for you. We wish you all continued health and good and well-being, and we just hope that you guys have a good rest of your day. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to send it over. I know Ophelia's email is in the chat, is in the slide, but I'll leave my email in the chat box for you as well if you wanted to follow up on anything. So again, thank you for all you do for our communities and for being resilient, and we hope to see you shoulder to shoulder with us as we handle this together. Thank you.